4 weeks from now, there are two versions of you. One of them thinks they've been meditating most mornings. The other one knows, because there's a grid on the fridge with 17 ticks and 11 blank squares, and no story you tell yourself can argue with a blank square. That's the whole thing, really. That's the difference between belief and evidence. So, does habit tracking actually work? The short answer is yes, but not for the reason most people assume. It isn't the app, it isn't the beautiful bullet journal, it isn't the satisfying little check mark that changes you. It's what tracking forces your brain to do, that ordinary good intentions never manage to do. It forces you to pay honest attention. There's nothing mystical in that, and I want to be clear about it up front. Tracking works because of what it does to attention and feedback. And once you can see those moving parts turning, the humble tick box stops being productivity theater and becomes a genuine lever on your behavior. Because real change isn't magic, it's mechanism. Let me name the everyday struggle by its clinical cousin, because that's where this gets interesting. In behavior therapy, there's a core technique called self-monitoring, the deliberate act of recording your own behavior so that it becomes visible to you. Patients log their eating, their moods, their smoking, and here's the strange part. The logging alone often shifts the behavior before any other treatment even begins. Psychologists have a name for that. They call it reactivity. The finding that the act of measuring a behavior changes it. Just watching yourself honestly moves the needle. So the recording is the intervention, not the record. The record is just the residue. Now, why? Why does writing it down do anything at all? It comes down to 3 overlapping mechanisms, and I want to take them one at a time, because this is where the tick box earns its keep. The first one is this: visibility beats memory. Your memory is a storyteller, not a ledger. It edits, it flatters, it quietly forgives you for the days you'd rather forget. Ask yourself how often you go to the gym, and the answer that comes back, "Oh, most weeks," is a story your memory has polished smooth. A tracker isn't a storyteller. A tracker is a ledger. When you can see 6 days on and 1 day off, laid out in a grid, self-deception has nowhere left to hide. It's the same principle behind a food diary or an expense log. The measurement itself creates the accountability, and data is uncomfortable in exactly the way growth requires. The second mechanism, the tracker becomes the cue. Every habit runs on a loop: cue, routine, reward. A tracker you see each and every morning becomes a reliable cue. A visual prompt sitting there in your environment, firing off the routine before you've had a chance to negotiate with yourself. This dovetails beautifully with habit stacking, where you anchor a new behavior to one you already do without thinking. The tracker is simply another anchor point, another handhold in your physical world that says, "Now, do it now." And the third, the completed square, is a micro reward. Marking a habit complete produces a small, satisfying hit, a flicker of reward tied to progress. As the journalist Charles Duhigg explains in The Power of Habit, it's the reward that cements the loop. The routine only sticks because something at the end of it feels good. And James Clear makes a related point in Atomic Habits. Let me quote him directly, because these are his words, not mine. Habit tracking is powerful because it leverages multiple laws of behavior change. It simultaneously makes a behavior obvious, attractive, and satisfying. That's Clear's phrasing, and it captures the mechanism precisely. Obvious, that's the visibility. Attractive and satisfying, that's the little dopamine flicker of not breaking the chain. So far, so encouraging. But I want to be honest about the edges of the evidence, because a brand that skips the caveats isn't worth your trust. Self-monitoring is genuinely one of the most reliably effective behavior change techniques we have. a large systematic review of self-monitoring in physical activity and diet, published by Maichi and colleagues in Health Psychology in 2009, found that interventions, which included self-monitoring, were significantly more effective than those without it. It's a foundational entry in something called the behavior change technique taxonomy, the standard reference researchers use to catalog what actually works. And then there's that famous figure, 66 days. The average time for a behavior to become automatic. That comes from Philippa Lally's 2010 study in the European Journal of Social Psychology. But here's what almost always gets lost when people quote it. The range. It took anywhere from 18 days to 254, depending on the person and the habit. So if you're not on autopilot by day 66, you're not broken. You're simply somewhere in a very wide, very normal distribution, and tracking matters most in that long, unglamorous formation window when the habit hasn't gone automatic yet, and your memory can't be trusted to report on it honestly. But here's the caveat that matters most. Much of this research measures self-monitoring as a part of broader programs. Tracking rarely does the whole job on its own. It's a lever, not an engine, which is exactly why the next part is so important. Because levers can also work against you. So when does habit tracking backfire? It backfires the moment the streak becomes the goal instead of the behavior. When a broken chain triggers shame, and shame triggers avoidance. You know this feeling. You've kept a perfect run of workouts for 3 weeks. You miss a single day, and then, quietly, you abandon the whole thing. Not with a decision, just with a slow, silent drift away from the grid. That's not weakness. Let me say that again, because it dissolves a lot of self-blame. That is not weakness. It's a well-documented pattern that behavioral psychologists call the what the hell effect. Once we break a self-imposed rule, we treat the small lapse as total failure, and we give ourselves permission to collapse entirely. One biscuit becomes the whole packet. One missed day becomes the end of the habit. It's perfectionism wearing a lab coat. All or nothing thinking, one of the classic cognitive distortions. And the reframe that dissolves it is beautifully simple. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. That's Clear's rule, and it's worth tattooing somewhere you'll see it. Never miss twice. Tracking fails in a few other ways too, and they're worth knowing. You track too much. 15 habits on day 1 is a recipe for overwhelm. Pick 1 or 2 keystone behaviors and let them pull the others along in their wake. Or the metric is vague. Be healthier can't be ticked. Walk 20 minutes can. Or, and this is the sneaky one, you confuse the tick with the outcome. A tracker measures effort, not results. Gaming your own grid fools nobody but you. And if your tracking is fueled by self-criticism rather than curiosity, if every blank square feels like an indictment, then the problem runs deeper than the habit. That's a matter of limiting beliefs, and no grid on earth will fix it. Track to notice, not to punish. So, how do you make it actually stick? Track for feedback, not for a flawless streak. Pick 1 or 2 habits, not 10. Make the metric binary. Did you do it? Yes or no. Binary is fast, and it's honest. Put the tracker where your eyes land before your excuses do. The fridge, the bedside table, the phone home screen. An unseen tracker is a dead tracker. Mark it immediately after the behavior, because delay lets memory start editing again. Apply the 2-day rule and review weekly, not obsessively, looking for patterns. Which days fail? Which contexts help? Then adjust your environment, not your willpower. Reducing friction will outperform grit every single time. And don't overspend on this. A South African reader on a budget needn't part with a cent. A printed grid on the fridge will outperform a 150 Rand a month premium app if that app lives buried on your fourth home screen. One warning though, if your tracker lives on your phone, it competes with everything else on that phone. The tool you built to sharpen your focus can quietly erode it. So if you open the app and lose 20 minutes, sort the phone out first, because the best tracker in the world isn't the most impressive one. It's the one your eyes land on before your excuses do. If this way of thinking lands with you, mechanism before tactic, no woo, no hype, then follow the show and come and join us over at the Rebuild newsletter, where we go a layer deeper. This episode was narrated by an AI clone of my own voice, trained on this show.